Hello, this is Richard Murphy from Tax Research UK. I'm talking about the Financial Secrecy Index that has just been published by the Tax Justice Network, and I undertook quite a lot of the research that provided part of the data that underpins that index. In particular, the information on the opacity, that is the secrecy, of 60 jurisdictions in the world. Now, all that information, how we selected the jurisdictions, the data we collected on them, why we chose 12 particular indicators to show the opacity of each place, all of that is to be found on a website called www.secrecyjurisdictions.com. Secrecy Jurisdictions is all one word, by the way. And you will find about 1,700 pages of data there, including a complete breakdown of all the data we collect on each place with our reference sources. So anybody who's got detailed questions, there's lots of answers to be had. But let's talk about the index itself. The index takes the opacity score that was created using the methodology that is shown on the secrecyjurisdictions.com website and matches that with some other data. Now, that other data is the financial flow that moves through a place. And this is very important because what we were trying to do was show how significant a place is with regard to the creation of financial secrecy in the world. I stress, financial secrecy, not a tax haven. This is not a tax haven index. This is about secrecy. The two are different. How do we get the data on financial flows? We went to a reliable source. We call it the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and looked at the data that they have on financial flows through different places. Now, in some cases, that data is, I admit, pretty, well, incomplete, but those places are locations like Montserrat. Now, all logic suggests that the financial flows through places like Montserrat are pretty small. So what we wanted to do was match together the information on opacity, which in some tiny places is basically absolute. There is no openness, no transparency at all, and match that with the volume of financial flows moving through a place to get some clear indication as to how, when you put these two pieces of information together, they contribute to the total financial secrecy that exists within the world's financial system. Why is that important? Simply for this reason. Financial secrecy does a number of things. First and most important, it completely distorts the way in which markets work, most particularly in financial markets, but also in others as well. And it does that by ensuring that there is what is called asymmetric information. Now, asymmetric information is simply that one party to a transaction knows more than the other party to the transaction. So they are better equipped to make a judgment on the risk inherent in that transaction than the people they're dealing with. That means they've got, obviously, an unfair competitive advantage as a result, and they're likely to come off best as a consequence. Now, that's obviously completely unfair. It does transfer risk from the person with the asymmetric information to the person who hasn't got it. And the whole reason why financial secrecy jurisdictions exist is to make sure that this asymmetric information is in the marketplace, giving an unfair competitive advantage to those who are using the financial secrecy jurisdiction. So that's the first reason why it's unacceptable. The second reason why financial secrecy is unacceptable is that it will always give rise to the risk of there being corruption, crime, tax evasion, money laundering, and a whole host of other sorts of crime. The hiding of the proceeds, of insider dealing, of money laundering, of drug trafficking, of human trafficking, of piracy, and much more besides. When you have no clue who owns a company, who manages a bank account, who is the settlor or the beneficiary of a trust, when you know that a company located in a place can be picked up and literally moved to another location through a process called redomiciliation, which we focused on quite hard, then we know that holding people to account for the sorts of abuse that they can undertake in these places is going to be very hard indeed. So that is again why financial secrecy is so important. And the third reason at this moment is, and let's come back to the core issue for the Tax Justice Network, tax. Because people evade their tax liabilities. So that's not news to anyone. People always have, people always will. I accept that's going to happen. We're never going to get a perfect tax system. But we could have a much better tax system, a much fairer tax system, with each person paying their way if we could eliminate the secrecy that exists in financial secrecy jurisdictions, the places that we have highlighted. And what comes out of the list of those who are really abusive? Well, extraordinarily, the one that is the biggest of all, and this is really because of the combination of financial flows and its opacity, is the USA. Now, the USA is a special problem case because the USA is, of course, a federal state. There is the federal law, which covers some things like banking secrecy, which is very important. And then there is the state law, which covers things like incorporation of corporations and the way in which they're registered and the requirement to put information on public record with regard to accounts. Now, we had to pick the federal law for most of the tests that we were doing in the USA, and we picked Delaware as the most commonly used state in the whole of the USA for incorporation of corporations as the individual state which represented the current financial secrecy dimensions of the USA. We could have also picked Nevada, by the way, or Wyoming. It's not alone, but we had to pick one. This is an index. It's an indication of what happens. Put together the federal level of transactions and then the fact that almost half of US corporations are in Delaware, an extraordinary proportion for a place of less than 1 million people, and then you come up with this amazing situation that the USA actually is the most opaque place in the world when ranked by the volume of flows going through it. Now, Luxembourg follows, and in the top 5 as well, you'll find Switzerland, you'll find the UK, usual culprits. Now, well-recognised financial centres. Down the list, by some way, are the tax havens. Jersey is in there, Switzerland is there, both as secrecy and tax. The Isle of Man is quite low, Guernsey higher at around 13. So they are lower, not because they aren't abusive, they are as pure tax havens, but the amount of money that flows through them is less than through places like the USA and Switzerland and the UK and even Singapore. So these places provide enormous opacity. That opacity, that secrecy, is undermining the whole of our financial system in the world at the present point of time. We are suffering because there has been too much risk in the system, which has been created by, at least in part, this lack of information about who is undertaking what transactions. That's the whole purpose of this index, to show who is creating that and to highlight how those issues can be attacked, can be amended, can be addressed in law, and that is where this index is really demanding action. We want change, we want openness, we want fair markets, we want to eliminate abuse, we want to eliminate crime, and we want people to pay tax in the right place at the right time, where right means that the economic substance of the transaction and the form in which it is declared for tax coincide. If that happens, for the vast majority of people in this world, we will have a higher level of income, probably a lower level of tax, less abuse, less fear of crime, and a better place to live. It's not much to ask for, and yet it's extraordinary that we find our major states are facilitating this abuse. That's why we want change. It's simple, it's straightforward. Let's get on and do it. Thanks for listening.